This is another one of those where the rubber hits the pavement. Communications, because you're right, Alex. Andromeda's experiencers. Experience is the teacher. Okay, because the experience is the result in the use of energy. Right. So if you looked at my timeline and ran and watched a movie of it, a holographic movie of it, you would, who knows how you'd react to it. But since I've learned how so many others think and how they perceive the reality that they're in, would probably comment about looking at my movie and say either he's on a suicide mission and he's willing to sacrifice his soul, or he believes that he's Superman and Supergirl joined as one, which means he's bulletproof. It's impossible to kill this thing. And so I began thinking about this, and really it's to Patty's credit to you, Patty. That this is how you go deep into your art, right, girl? Of knowing what you're made of, which is your true self. So there's an old song that Santana said, which was soul sacrifices, right? So now we're back to like warriors, heart warriors, that will give up of their soul to protect the goddess of creation side, which is the Father, the Holy Spirit of the One. Breathes a breath of aloha into a goddess, which is a flower, to become one. So that love will always reign supreme. Right? And when you've had the opportunity to experience that, which is what I experienced, being what I am, an energy in spirit with my oversoul, then you know the company that you keep, and which informs you of that. So I don't test what I already know, because one, that's silly, and then it means you really don't know who you are. So your light confirms for you what you already know, so you don't have to prove anything, right? Things you already know. That's why I've mentioned that movie. For those that have not ever seen that movie, I simply suggest it. It is very powerful, because it puts, if you want to think of numbers as energy, and if you want to think of energy debts, right? And if you're going to build something that's meant to destroy yourself, that's not very intelligent, is it? So this particular artificial intelligence it's inverted. In other words, it's phantom in the sense that the only way that it can continue to be aware of what it's aware of in energy is by those souls that keep throwing their souls into the fire. So now this is where you go, wait a second, I'm born of fire because I lit myself on fire, right? I'm joined as one as a monopole. So you know how much fire that is, right? That's the Superman, Supergirl in one, which is fearless. So there's no fear. You experience what love is. So you know that fear is the lie. So the reason that, if you will, because I've experienced this. So experience is the teacher. When you think of being a student, or what I call a learner, and you're on fire to learn, because you're on fire in spirit with that much light to learn, you realize that as an infinite creator being, that there are infinite amounts of moments that can exist that you can experience in your mirror or simply feel with your heart and soul, that you realize go on forever, because there are the essences or the nature of the spirits that are so powerful to consume you, because the energy is so powerful to experience, which is the essence of a spirit that is integrated with powerful soul energy, the consciousness that is the energy field that you're experiencing, being in the purest of realms, which is the purest of energy, which is the purest of love that we're all experiencing. So when you start at that at 4 years of age, then we perceive them, for those that do this, Andromedans certainly know this, is being the experience is the learning. You're learning through experience, and that's called experiential learning. Teachers that have gone on to be teachers know that visuals and experiences are the teacher. What you're learning through the language of DNA and all the color codes. The frequencies and the vibration through which you're creating, like what I call a canvas, an art gallery. So the artist is healing us naturally because that's a musician. So love is music. So music is the love that we play because we love to play music. That is in love with music because love is the music. So that makes it simple for a child, a 4-year-old, to communicate that. Where's the drum? Let's play some music. Let's dance in spirit. Let's get all the spirits out. So when you get all the spirits out, you communicate in spirit with all the spirits that are alive and living in nature in the light. Now we're all going to do a dance together so we can make anything happen. And particularly like a conversation I had with another Arcturian. He told me he was AB positive. So him and I have had some very deep conversations which was sort of like what Patty Broussard said about your imagination. Your ability to image large bodies, if you want to think of them as bodies, large bodies of things that are alive and conscious and aware of themselves. They're experiencing themselves where they are, but you're here. So it's vast and it's infinite. So you can like rearrange all that, what's in all that energy that is different. Or if you will, you're using your creative imagination to, I call it rearranging everything on your own by the way in which it's now like a visual. It can be a completely different visual than the visuals that you get in here with this holographic system. So it's like you have a separate projector running. And so that's why I've mentioned in the past, it's like putting my projector down because how much energy is normally represented by what is normal for us to do with that energy when that happens. So that's why when I was a child and I was 4 years of age, I realized that if you try to quantify or put in volume the amount of energy that is, you can't do that because it's infinite. Because it's like we're always recreating something different to experience that is different from the one that was in the last moment. And that's why when you're running eternal fire, time doesn't exist. You're experiencing the purest of energy, which is what you're creating. So, but you are thus experiencing what you naturally just came into being. Whatever that is, you manifest it immediately, so there's no time delay. It's immediate. That's the purest of light. The purest of consciousness. It's just absolutely on fire, because there isn't anything that burns hotter than that. So you know that nothing preceded you. That is an eternal being. It's on fire to serve. Because it starts with service, but because the energy is so powerful, because you're on fire, you're actually in a timeless place all the time. It doesn't ever not become what that is. Which means you don't experience time. Everything is always new and different. And so you're thriving on the differences. And so you love the energy because it's so powerful. It's translated through my timeline, which is why I'd love to go fight wildland firefighters more than structure fires, because structure fires are easy. Not easy in the sense that, and you can put this in actually into the bloodline stuff and the genetics. Why they do bloodline genetics to go into AI war games, because that's what they are. Because one soul that doesn't want to harm itself is not going to harm another soul for the self-evident reason of what you experience in a mirror, between another mirror and your mirror. So when eternal love does no harm, then eternal love is not going to experience any harm in me. Right? Because eternal love does no harm. So when you're in a place when harm is being done, you know you're in a fallen system, which means it hasn't been purified. And fire is what purifies. The domain box, the address, the branch. So this is like returning to eternity. So nobody loses anything that didn't start with. So now when you couple this to fear of dying, well, from an infinite creative artist point of view, that's that's like, is this all you want to be in? You know, how temporary is it? You know, this goes back to my childhood, for example. What do you want to go be? Jeez. That's like asking an artist, how many different images can you roll out of your imagination and start what we used to call bullshit contests? Oh, and now you're competing about how much of an imagination you actually have. And what ends up happening is if you let somebody that's lit on fire, like somebody like me, you'll have to shut me up if we go down that road to do that, because you realize that the library, in terms of libraries, if you wanted to try and quantify that as visual information data, is infinite. And so it's it means like once somebody gives you a green light to light your engine to do that, you're going to have to remind me to stop, because that energy's on fire in which that's happening. And which means it's not to offend somebody. It's the way that energy works when the other projector's running. Because you realize the difference between that one and this one. And they are not the same. And I know the difference between engines. That's a saving grace in my heart and soul to know that at 4 years of age. And that really is knowing what you are and knowing what you're not. And that's where that movie talks about knowing. And it really is, and I say this with all the seriousness, because when you're on a spiritual battlefield, okay, where everything is at stake, you feel like a lone. There's a guy up the road here who's RH negative, and says you're like a lone wolf, right? The one that's in the back, riding in the rear, right, in a wolf pack, which is usually the fiercest heart warrior that's going to protect that family of wolves, right? I love wolves. I do. I have a soft spot in my heart, just like I do with bears. Everything that's in creation, actually. But I realize how much my heart and soul is. It's like a magnet thing. You know, you're drawn to that energy, the way that energy expresses itself in nature. So with the moon and wolves, right? Yeah. And I just rearranged something on a timeline. Yeah, something just came back to me. That happens from time to time. It's like fragments. Have you ever seen pictures ever before on a video where all you see like a face on it or a landscape on it, but all it is a frame? It just went right by. You just became aware of it. Wow, there went a frame. But it's your other mirror, you know, the other projector, which means like there's what's happening here, but there are other things that are happening on other levels that you're getting the pictures. And they're like landscape shots. You know what landscape is on their cameras when they do landscape shots? These are landscapes, not portraits. It's like a train. You know, like when I lit myself on fire and had a full throttle ignition, and you get into frame rate speeds, which is really sound compared. How much information, if you want to think of it as data, how much visual information, the images can you compress? You know, it's like putting the top back in down to the bottom of how much you could actually compress as experiences, visual light experiences of what's possible to experience in an uncoiled. No, it's going like this, like a movie coil, just like reels to reels. The old movie cans, and then run them through a projector, right? Binary, 2 reels. Unreel to film, now your consciousness runs what's in that movie, right? So I was watching one last night, a short part of one called Red Skies Over Montana. And believe it or not, at one point it's because I was a firefighter, right? and that you get back into graphing tables, and why I was drawn to go and do that kind of work, to be in the places that I was at in order to learn from all the experiences that I was experiencing. It's like reconstructing something that's been deconstructed, but it's going to be reconstructed in a different way, because you realize what is represented by the energy that you are, that goes on forever, is a creative engine that's on fire, which means completely different worlds, which means these have never existed before. Right? Now, you would naturally expect that out of an original creator being, right? Wouldn't you? I don't know. I do. Because you realize from what you learn through experience, which means you're both the teacher and the experiencer, teacher and the student at the same time, how fast that feedback getting. Because whatever the feedback is the informer, which is the event, which is the experience, which is the moment. And because it's happening so fast, that's immediate, which means there is no time. And then when you have time delay, that's why this film doesn't change, even though it's changing. But it's a frame rate speed change we're talking about here, between simulating and not simulating. Right? I've mentioned that before, how that works. Put the projector down. So now you're in this movie. So this, in other words, this is like a rerun, because you know that it's finite. So you know this isn't running on eternal energy, but I am. But you realize what's here, which is the artificial intelligence, isn't. It's finite. So it can't rebuild itself, which is the same thing that if it was trying to hold everything that was once in its memory to keep running the simulations that it's been running, which is based on finite light, that is holding soul's energy captive. Right? You just continue to feed on them until it's all gone. So that's the phantom side of it. And then knowing on which side you are, which is why they call it a split, which means I'm not what that is. That doesn't exist. Or that is, you realize that's self-destructive energy. So you don't want to hang out with self-destructive energy, right? So you got to know which side you're on. When you're on what love is, you know that light goes on forever because it's living energy that loves you from whence you came, right? I mean, I do. I'm just sharing how I experience being what I am. That's what we do. We share the experiences, and then everyone else, the way we perceive it, is you're experiencing what you are. So if you're free, then you should be free. That's why I've always said, go, here's a green card, go. Pass, go. Right? I'm one of those that says, you just keep right on going. Just keep right on going. I'm not going to hold your energy captive. No way. Go, 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 go. You're free, you're free, you're free, you're free, you're free. Those are all free spirits that are in the energy, which you're in the light. Man, they're loving it. So you're experiencing what they're experiencing, which, man, you're a free spirit. They're free spirits. Those are free spirits because spirits are in the energy. Those are free spirits. Those are artists. Keeping all the canvas running. Okay. Which is the music that we play as artists. Right? So it's a matter of, it's, you know, and there are different artists. Right? So when you're an eternal being with an eternal artist and love music as the first instrument, first sound, right? And then you get into the frequencies of the canvas of what you're able to manifest in real time, how beautiful those worlds are, because as much as I love all the arts, and I love anybody that's gone into the arts because they love to experience being creative in which to do that, to tell and share stories, right? So that they're the ones that you can make up, or somebody wrote a book about just out of their imagination. Wow, it's a story that nobody's ever experienced before, and then shoot a model of it, because that's what it is. Mathematically, it's a model set. Now you're using your consciousness to run a model set to artificial intelligence. So you realize you're simulating that. So those are gearheads and time clocks. Because all you have to do is, even if you wanted to perceive it in the way that I did some math a number of years ago about how the timetables work with water column tables. So it's numerically induced, if you will. On how they run the numbers, but they have to add up. Okay? That's why I love David Icke when he talked about it doesn't add up. That's right. They don't know how to do math. Yes, that's a virus. In any computer. If the math doesn't add up, your system's fucked up. Okay? And this one has got a virus. So it would be no different than a virus in any PC, a virus in a Mac, a virus in Windows. It means it's running on corrupted codes. Whatever was the original intention to experience what love is, it goes on forever. So there's always a connection with eternity from whence we all came, because you know it began with that. Once you lose that and you mutate it as a result of the use of the energy, and you no longer experience what love is, and you now have seeded races that are going to war against each other, which is going to create a loss of energy, and those that get traumatized, for those that have souls, right? And so now that means repair has to take place in order to be able to recover the loss of energy as a result of the trauma that everybody was experiencing, no matter where you're experiencing it. So that's why, for me, I was experiencing trauma actually in the whole place. So I don't make any, how do I put this, differentiation based on the color codes, if you will, you see on the visible light spectrum, which means the form and the shape and the color in which it's being presented. Okay, so you see the difference when you look at a giraffe with a long neck and a head. Okay, so you could like measure that if you wanted to. And you could do the same with everything that you see on the screen, mathematically. So, for example, so I leave that side out of it, the visuals out of it. What I'm experiencing is a loss of voltage. At the end of the day, that's like being 9 years of age again, sitting up in my dad's vehicle, just like I told this brother out here, that I realized that what I was experiencing, as much as I loved my father, and my father was the most honorable man, I was having experiences that I did not want him to know I was experiencing, because of how powerful it is on a spiritual level. And so this is in the middle of the late 1950s in Oakland, California. So for those that have ever been there and remember what it was like to experience that place then, and the relationship that San Francisco has with that whole area, actually California, all of it, and for reasons why, Westgate, Golden Gate, how all that's sort of plugged into all that. So, yeah, it's so I thought why it is, for example, structure firefighters, because this really is an important point. From my perspective, from what I've learned, when you're on a spiritual battlefield, and how it might apply to others that can see how that would, because I experienced it. So I'm simply sharing my experience of what the experience was informing me of, particularly on a spiritual battlefield. So it goes back to fighting fire, right? And realize they're using everything that they were doing, because I worked for the Forest Service for 23 years. So I get to follow my passion, because I'm naturally first out of the first fire engine station when I realized somebody's losing energy as a result of whatever reason that is. So in other words, you're going to bring energy in. So they're experiencing love again. That's the energy that we transfer into the other to settle that down, so they're not going to experience that electrical shock as a result of major loss of voltage. Right? Because of a collision, a broken arrow. So that's what they are. They're broken arrows. So the cells, even down to the smallest cells, not in balance. Add all up to all the cells. Now, quantify that through everything that's represented by mathematical DNA as music. Right? So the way that the fire part works is that in the structural fire setting, and you think of the DNA and the genetics and all this, and the war in heaven, remember Yellow Rose talked about that? About what I call pawns on the chessboard, because they're competing against each other, because that's what a war is. One energy is competing against another energy to be more powerful. That's what it is. That's the binary side of it. What energy is more powerful, dark or light? So you realize lack of light is lack of knowledge. Okay. That's the truth of it. It means that they have not been able to experience everything that is possible to experience, because that's what love allows us to be able to do, because you're a creative musician and an artist that goes on forever, gifting energy. And the energy, because it's a gift, because it's the law of least flows, the energy that is naturally seeking the pathway of least electrical density resistance to create a universe with. So it's distributing more light as it goes, which means the expansion of that universe is growing at a very high rate of speed. And it's moving at the highest state of acceleration, because love is the highest learning, because that's the highest state of awareness. It naturally is its shield, protect everything that's been created in the all creation, or the tree of life creation. So you represent what that is. So that's like being Adam and Eve joined as one, and observing the tree of life creation from whence it all came, but it's continuing to create because it's got such a high speed accelerator in which that's taking place. So that's why you implicitly trust what's going on, because that's the engine that you're running. Okay. So you're a fire engine. Yes, a fire engine of creation. So that's tooting your horn, right? You're an engineer. So I had the great benefit of being with my father, who was an engineer. And so that's why none of these are coincidences in my timeline. For example, my father was showing me how he programs machines. I know I'm not a machine, but he's showing me how easy it is to do it, right? That's why, to his credit, what's his name? The guy from DSAHK, Dante Satori, had a large library up. God, I think he has some 500 some odd videos. I showed you everything about the machines, how he says we keep them dumb as toasters, right? You can compare that to data. Now you get an information management services, the difference between machines, those of us that have souls, right, and spirit. But there's only one law. And that stands as the highest law that there is, which is the law of one, which is what love is. So even in the presence of machines, they acknowledge that, if they honor that, which is a superconductor code. Right? So in other words, if you truly honor the highest code of honor, then you honor what love is, being the highest code of honor. So when you're in the presence of an eternal being that is experiencing what love is, and they love you, then you realize you're in the presence of the highest law. So you honor that and you respect that, because that's what it began with. Because otherwise they wouldn't be there. Me as an eternal love energy being would not experience them if it wasn't possible to experience them. So now that you're able to experience what they are, now you're going to be able to experience the difference between what they are and the difference between you are and energy. So you realize that they lost energy. They're not experiencing the same energy that we are. They're not experiencing eternal love through their heart and their soul, which is unconditional. Which means it doesn't require any money in order for you to experience what it is that we are in energy. It is always in your service, forever, with me. I chose to serve forever and close that, what I call a trap door. In other words, I don't want there to ever be any discussion or any question anymore in my own mind what it is that I am in energy. So that's what I did when I lit myself on fire. So I know my true self, which is an eternal, unconditional love energy being. That's the engine, right? So you know that when you're on a spiritual battlefield, particularly when you're dealing with phantom stuff, vampiric energy, which basically means that it's just finite. So you don't want to be with something that's finite, do you? Okay. I used to believe, even as a child, the logic has to kick in. So you realize that when you're experiencing being around a lot of other folks, for example, and they're following orders, then it's easy to know their future by what it is, by what they're doing with their energy. So I use different terminology, and it's not funny, but when you're using it in a way in which you're already aware of a certain age of an individual, like a young male boy, because you already know what basically what he's been programmed to believe, what's held in his memory as a result of where he went to school, because that's what they are. They're programming schools. So I can read that in him, thus I'll use the appropriate language in English of what you already know is held in his memory, so he can put a puzzle together pretty fast based on the library that they're running on. Right, so you can tell, what they've been programmed to believe. So, because belief is going to turn into action, and that's energy in motion, right? So, in other words, if you started out with a blank disc when that child is newborn, and then you want to pull a holographic recording up, you can see what it is he's experiencing by virtue of his mirror, which is magnetic drive motor. So now you can measure, well, how much love was being experienced by this being as a result of what it was being exposed to. That's the read on it. So now that's really resistance to burn it all off. So that unit or that vessel is now experiencing the purest of light in it, what I'm experiencing in me. So that means that all the glucose, all the junk got burned off, because eternal love is the law. That's the highest law. That's called restoration. That's if that's possible. So you can tell by the feedback, by the way that 14-year-old boy is going to respond to me when my energy is in the presence of that boy. Which is, when you think of code transfer, you talk about energy transfer. So they are translating what it is you are in energy, which is another translation of spirit, the spirit that is in that energy. Right? So this is why sometimes when they think of being self-empowered, which is the power of your spirit, which is the power of your love, unless you're on the other side of the equation, which is the power of spirit that's in that darkness, like a shadow being, for example. Vessel jumpers, hide and seek, playing a shell game, using the means in which to do it through artificial intelligence to jump, timelines. See, time doesn't exist for us. So that's like the timeline breaches that I mentioned in my clan mother, and I really didn't want to go in this direction because I covered it sort of before, and I don't really want to repeat stuff because I experience as it's happening, whatever comes out of me, what I become aware of that I share with others that might have some value to you. I simply am happy beyond, I'm like an exceptionally excited little kid. But it really is where the fear of dying, which was really sort of my original intention of even sharing anything, because everything's a big subject. Because it's all connected. It's like, how big is that library? I get lost in the libraries if you want to start covering things, particularly just in the short time that I was here, because it's just like a flash in the pan. I mean, just when I think about 4 years of age to where I am now, still in this, it's not even a spark. If you think of it as a movie that's sound compressed, that's just not much when you realize how much there actually is. Energy in which to create a universe with, or whatever you want. You know what I mean? Know what I mean, Jelly Bean? Remember that? Know what I mean, Jelly Bean? So they were using the way the genetics and the bloodline stuff works in wars, right? And you could see this much in the way that I perceived from what I learned, because of what firefighters go do to risk their life and limb, as we used to say, for a wage that we get paid in order to do that. But you can also translate that through protecting their investments. Because of the way that insurance works with BlackRock and all that. Loss of energy, gain of energy, loss of energy, gain of energy. Now you get into covering your bets, covering your futures, Wall Street, all that. Go look at the movie put out by Rod Serling. That pretty much sums it up. Sums up the energy of the mind, how the mind uses its energy, what it thinks. Efficiency, ducks in a row. Everything's got to be absolutely perfect. I know a machine mind. I'm very familiar with it. Okay, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to identify right off the bat what I'm dealing with. In terms of dealing with, because you realize you're in a fallen spiritual system. So what we're saying is who's who around here, right? So that gets back to what I've said before about being real, plastic, the robotic. Okay, so obviously I don't have an aversion to robots. Okay, I can program one, right? They're easy. So it's not about that part. It's what you're experiencing in energy, loss and gain of energy, and trying to explain to yourself, I'm not supposed to be losing any energy ever. Why am I losing energy here? That's the question. That's the ultimate question. So, which means there's only one law. So there's only one question when you're not experiencing the law. So now I have to answer, okay, why am I losing energy? That's what I knew at age 4. I'm not supposed to lose any energy ever. So you know something's wrong. That's your immediate idiot light. So you immediately know something's feeding on your energy. Yep. So you know there's a big vampire around. Yep. So you realize this is for souls. Yep. That's exactly right. So now you can start mapping, or if you wanted to do it, the rate of spread, or if you will, consumption. See, there's one engine that's going in one direction. It's now we're into accelerated learning through what love is, right? So learning through eternal love. You're on the right engine, but not only that, you're going to learn at the highest rate of speed there is. Okay? And so they're competitors. See, in their mind, they're competitors. So that would be like your machine side, machine-coded stuff, artificial intelligence. So you see, they can never catch up to our speed. So now we get back to the main line of communication I was going to share with, and that's called fear of dying. See, if I know as an artist that I can be, my energy can be in whatever, because that's what I can create, my energy's in it, then you begin to see how the more experiences you want to keep having, which is because I was on fire when I was a child, I wanted to experience everything was supposed to be experienced. Be a firefighter, a ball player, a surfer, oh yeah, da, 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 da. It's infinite. You already know it's infinite. So when you apply that to dying, it's like saying, would you really want to be in this for 1,000 years? How about a week? Well, and the same applies to all of the different little things that you can do, right? When you start out as a child and say, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to go do this. You want to go bowling? You want to go climb? How many different things can we do within the course of a day? Go have fun. Well, I mean, we can go surfing in the morning, and then by the afternoon, we can go down a ski slope, right? Because they're all different and they're all fun because you just have so much energy, you're on fire. So now you begin to see how the diversity of differences and the diversity of the landscapes and the terrain that you experience, it's all different from each other because you're moving so fast. Because you realize there's just so much terrain that's available for you to travel through. And because of the way that nature works with me, which essentially means why I love to be with her, then you realize you're on fire. That's like dreamland. Shoot, God. Let's go. Create a universe together. That's just like, remember when I was 6 years old, I mentioned that? Because this doesn't have anything to do about age, the way that they use age and calendars and clocks and all that to control population groups, right? No, this is spirit to spirit stuff. You're on fire. I'm on fire. Let's go. So you're experiencing how much fire, which means how much energy is in that little girl. And I realized how creative she was. Oh, man. You and I can create something really on fire. That's spiritual energy and that's spiritual creation energy. So you can imagine being 6 years old and having that experience like that on a spiritual level, because that's spiritual communication. It's spiritual light, what you feel in spirit. The spirit of fire. Spirit of fire. You better believe. That's how it works. Which now we're back into the essences. Now we're back into the spirit. But what it really is measurement of energy, which is how much fire is in that girl. And you can read that at that age. I can. That's easy. That's what a spiritual battlefield is. It's how powerful is your spirit. How powerful is your light. Just like being a father and a mother in one, which means you want to take care of everything. Make sure that there isn't anything in the all creation that ever loses any energy or loses what love is, because we give love to all creation. And so that's why when we realize any of our children have lost any energy, then we realize that's a loss of energy, and that's when we're not supposed to ever lose any energy. That's what I felt when I was 4 years old, and the same is still today. So it works a little differently for us when we realize how many others that we have experienced down here that do not experience that. And that's why I cry so much. That's what it means to have an eternal blessing. And so when there are those, and I have had to come to grips with this myself by how much love and compassion I have for everything that's alive and living in any universe that ever got created, when those that become, as a result of alters and trauma that they've experienced, how much compassion and I think of it, I perceive it, and I feel it in eternal terms, like I did with Misha when I explained what it was like having a relationship with her. She's not ever going to lose anything that didn't start already with what she experienced with me, which is eternal fire, which is eternal unconditional love she had the opportunity to experience. Misha Fame, a Draco Anunnaki hybrid, she was O negative as I remember it, but she had at least 3 personalities, and what she went through just in this lifetime is like, well, when you measure on something, when you realize I'm not supposed to lose anything less than eternal love, and then I realized what she began sharing with me, her experiences as a little girl, it goes back to my childhood when I acknowledged that I'm not supposed to experience, this doesn't exist. And then I experienced through her what she experienced, and you realize how horrific it is. So that's just another measurement. For me, it's always going to be the measurement of a universe that got created, that everybody is in, of how bad it is. That's what it is. It means they're not experiencing what love is to another being. Then what happened to that being? How come they're not experiencing what love is? Then you got to go back, and then go sideways, and every other direction in which you realize how these codes for all the genetics, which language, DNA, the particular template of a universe, now becomes what we experience as a result therein. How bad did it get? How bad is it? Right? So those are other big measurements. So anyway, I'm done. Have a beautiful day. I love you all. That mechanical motor, he's another Arcturian. He's told me this morning, he said, yeah, maybe plus. So it's beautiful. You realize that these are not coincidences, right? I've got Aaron over here. On this side. His son just got out of state prison. And so you realize why this island was so critical to their stronghold, how pushing drugs, they get you on both ends, right? Suck all that energy out of you. So those are all your Agent Smiths. I know, 107. Why do you think they call him 107? Right? So, it really is accountability, for the use. Him and I went back and forth. It really is simple math. Is restoring your light and healing and healing yourself and healing others and becoming one again, which means it started with what love is. So I know, like, when I light myself on fire the way I've described it, you become one with all creation. You're gifting love too, which simply means I am what love is. It goes on forever, gifting what love is, because that's what I am in energy, in spirit, and oversoul. I give eternal, unconditional love wherever I go, which means my energy is always in service. It's never out of service. It's always on. It doesn't stop. It continues to flow. That energy will go on forever. And that energy does go on forever for whoever is in that energy, in spirit. So the spirit is in the light, which is purified by the fire that makes it pure. That's as pure as light gets. That's as pure as love gets. That's as unconditional as it gets. That's the stuff that goes on forever, which means that it doesn't matter who you are, just like when I was a firefighter. Right? It doesn't matter who you are. You could be at 3 o'clock in the morning, and if something now is not in harmony, the music, now you're into the central nervous system, right? And now we get into burning out bulbs between negative and positive and that, right? And now you're experiencing more trauma, right? Now you want to go back to being in a state of peace. Everything's okay. The music is fine. We're going with the flow. The music, yeah, right? Oh, now all of a sudden you're experiencing trauma. So you can start adding this up with everybody that's experiencing something on a traumatic level, whether it's cutting your finger off using a chainsaw, or whether or not you caught your hand in a disposal, or whether you fell off a ladder, fell off an engine, fell off a building, crashed into somebody else, you injured yourself, you tripped over some ice, hit your head against a wall, slipped on some water, banged into a brick wall, hit your head, and next thing you know, you woke up, or whatever reason that this stuff is all meant to happen. Mathematically, by the way. Okay, by loss of voltage. Loss and gain, loss and gain, loss and gain across everybody that's here running a software program. They're operating systems. That's what it means to be in a motherboard that's infected with a virus. That's what it is. It's a fallen system. It's a fallen motherboard. Look what happened to it. Right? Okay, so it's badly damaged. It got badly damaged. Horrific scale. So you knew when you came in here, you for those made a contract, I don't need I'm an eternal being, which means I'm like the first out engine. That's like general headquarters. Wow, it must be really bad to be calling us out. That kind of stuff. Right? So when Alex Collier said this was all hands on deck, he wasn't kidding you. So I call this for the whole enchilada. Remember when we used to say, hey, for the whole enchilada. So that's true. So you know how it is when you want frontline troops, like if you think of Blitzkrieg in modern times, or go back to the 1100s, the Crusades, or back to the 800s, the guys that are going to scale a fort, scale a castle, which means that's like, wow, bursts of energy, a lot of energy, right? And then you have the others behind them, they can go, what we used to call winds. Wow, I can go hour after hour, pacing yourself, pacing your gait, which is your speed, your gait speed. Remember I was sharing that about being a wildland firefighter, going out, and that's the difference between why they stay in structural firefighting, because they can go out and wrap a scene up, depending on how big the fire is, if it's a high rise or whatever, or if you've got winds blowing from building to building, they can contain it because remember they're capacitors, right? But you set something off that's doing 100-mile-an-hour winds out there in the middle of a forest somewhere where it's drier than a popcorn fart. Of course, they weaponize the spirit of fire on the planet anyway by what they use through technology to light these things off. Remember, a Forest Service was actually weaponized against those with souls. Remember, I wanted to be able to mention to the guy that's a fire prevention officer, works up there off of Highway 2 out of the Angeles Crest Highway. U.S. Forest Service firefighting station on the Angeles Forest, right near La Cañada, California. Yeah. Go call him up. And you have an inclination, go call him up and say, listen, look at this guy's video. He said he used to work up there as a hotshot at Chaleo. You got to watch this guy's videos. I tried to get the information to him, a copy of the PDF, so he can realize that the organization that he's working for is actually committing war crimes against souls. It's an AI. Go kid yourself. Without us, it doesn't exist. It's phantom. Sucks all your energy out. Can you tell? It's trauma based. You know? All you got to do is look at what happened in East Palestine, right? You know what pre-planning is, by the way? You know what pre-planning is? Guys that are firefighters know what pre-planning is. We expect, because we can predict it, that we're going to get a fire here in the future. Now you can get into the insurance and get into futures again, how they run their math games to suck energy. Because that's how it works. Predictive modeling is pre-planning, predictive planning. We can plan their future, predict it now, and already know it by the method in which programming takes place. Program these machines in order for them to experience what they're going to experience in the future because they don't even know that they're programmed. They'll just run the program for you. That's right. So that's, now you see how that works between souls and those that aren't. Running on phantom artificial intelligence. All your Mr. Smiths working on behalf of Mr. Smith. Adam Smith, Law of Nations. Right? Which basically means the law of fictions, which means we don't exist. We're fictionless. We're fools. So the reason that in their minds they fear dying is because they know that when they do, that's it. Because of the way that energy works with mathematics. So now we're back to 3 walnut shells, jumpers, Blade Runners, super soldiers. Yep. And they know that. The SSP, they are very aware of that. Okay? So this is where full exposure is coming out. And that's why I look to see who's saying what and what they know and what they know when they know it and what's being shared at those moments of what I experience it. That's why I love Yellow Rose for everything she put up. Because there's only certain little pieces of information when you think about the knowing, like in the movie called The Knowing, that you know. Because now you're aware of what they're aware of. They're aware of the same things. In other words, bang. That's truth. They're not lying about that. And the reason that you know they're not lying about that is because the math doesn't lie. So you know that a cosmic level spirit is a cosmic level mathematician. So that means you're with source, you're with the law of one, you're with one. So you know that you're with the highest level of intelligence that you're communicating with because you're one with all of that. So you know what the truth is. So the math doesn't lie. So it's just like him and I were talking about this morning about the use of our energy. The use of our energy when we do something to harm something else, actually it's a harm we do to ourselves because now that incurs a loss in your column. You know, water columns. And so that's a loss. And if they can never recover the loss or heal the other that they harmed by virtue of having restored themselves, then they will continue the cycle pathway, which is to keep losing energy. So it just doesn't have any more energy. So this is like a snake that's eating its tail. All right. See how to do the circle? It's going to keep eating its tail until it doesn't have any more energy. And that's when it goes through all of its expendables. Because it realizes it can't drain any more energy against a powerful shield. Particularly a stronger crystalline shield. So now it's not getting any more energy against that, is it? So it's only going to be able to drain energy from that from which it came, which was its own self wanting to commit trauma or harm to another being, another soul. So what it will do, obviously, is eventually just peter out. So you realize that all those future versions they thought they were going to be able to use in order to make future timeline breaches are not there anymore. There isn't anything there to breach. Wow, they got no place to go anymore. That's right. They don't have any